Good evening, everyone. My name is Benedict Lucca, Executive Director of the Redwood Library, and I want to welcome you this evening for another edition of Professor Markward's Music Appreciation Series. This evening, he is going to speak to us about Gustav Mahler. As he explained earlier, the linchpin between the 19th and 20th centuries. So, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Professor Edward Markward. Thank you all so much.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for coming to this talk. A few years ago, I did a presentation on Mahler's life and many of his works. Tonight, we are going to concentrate on Mahler, where he used songs in his symphonies. The songs came first, either with or without orchestra, sometimes with piano and sometimes with a full orchestra as the vehicle for transporting the text and the singer. Mahler was an isolationist in that he liked very much to work alone. And during his lifetime, he had, depending on where he lived, 3 composing huts built, the last in Toblach region of the Tyrol. And that's where he liked to work. I'm not going to give a whole lot of biographical information this evening, so we can really concentrate on listening to these wonderful pieces. He was a solitary artist, as I said, and there's a poem by Friedrich Rickert, whose poems Mahler said quite frequently. It is called I Am Lost to the World. Ich bin der Welt abhanden gekommen. And this is sort of Mahler's mantra, if you will. Rickert lived from 1788 to 1886. He was a poet, a translator, and a professor of Asian languages in Germany. I am lost to the world with which I used to waste much time. It has for so long known nothing of me. It may well believe that I am dead, nor am I at all concerned. If it should think that I am dead, nor can I deny it. For truly, I am dead to the world. I am dead to the world's tumult, and rest in a quiet realm. I live alone in my heaven, in my love, and in my song. Mahler's symphonies are emotionally charged and very subtly orchestrated. He wrote for huge orchestras, but not always using all of the instruments at the same time, sometimes down to a quintet of 5 or 6 instruments, or one section versus another section, and then eventually we get the full complement of players. In using song in his symphonies, he took his cue from Beethoven, the Ode to Joy in the Ninth Symphony, and Mendelssohn, the Second Symphony, the Lobgesang, or the Song of Praise. Mahler was born into a Jewish family in Kalište, Czechoslovakia at that time. He had 11 siblings, 7 of which died in childhood. And that may, of course, have colored some of his outlook on life. Later, of course, his oldest daughter, died at age 4. And a couple of years later, he found that he had a congenital heart problem, which ultimately did take his life. Mahler studied with Bruckner, and the influences on Mahler were Beethoven, Bruckner, and through Bruckner, Wagner. The reason he was a summertime composer is because his full-time job was as a conductor. He entered the conservatory at age 15, graduated as both a composer and a conductor, and decided that the conducting path afforded him a better living, so that's what he did as his profession. For 10 years, he was the music director of the Vienna Staatsoper, or at that time called the Vienna Court Opera, And of course, as you know, from 1909 till 1911, he was the music director of the New York Philharmonic. And an interesting occurrence there is that he met Charles Ives. Now, it may seem a little strange that Mahler and Ives would have anything in common, but indeed they did. Mahler used things that he had heard growing up in the woods, marches, military bands going by his home, tavern music coming from his father's tavern, which his father owned. And Ives, of course, used hymn tunes, marches, parlor songs, and even Stephen Foster songs. When Mahler returned in 1911 to Vienna, ultimately to die there, he carried with him the score to Ives' Third Symphony, which Ives had written a couple of years earlier. Mahler had every intention of programming that symphony when he returned to New York the following year, but of course, that never took place because of his death, and Ives had to wait until 1947 to have that piece, that symphony, premiered. The major works are 10 symphonies, 4 song cycles, huge song cycles. He didn't write any operas. He felt he directed opera all year long. Why write another one in the summer? And the songs are used with or without voice in the symphonies, and we will explore that momentarily. The 4 song cycles are Lieder eines fahrenden Gesellen, or the Songs of a Wayfarer, which he wrote in 1884 and 1885. They are 4 songs to Mahler's own texts. Next was Des Knaben Wunderhorn, 1892 to 1895, the Youth's Magic Horn. And there are 12 or 13 or maybe 2 times a dozen of those. Some were orchestrated immediately, some were accompanied by piano or collaborated by the pianist. And then in 1901, he set 5 Rickert songs, one of which we explored the text for earlier. And then the last song cycle was Kindertotenlieder, or Children's Death Songs, in 1904, also to a text by Rickert. The 10 symphonies plus Das Lied von der Erde, or the Song of the Earth, which is a hybrid. And the reason he sandwiched that in after number 8 is because he was sort of it was suspect that he might die, as Beethoven and Bruckner only wrote 9 symphonies. So he's a little bit suspicious about that. I want to plunge right into our first example, which is right in Symphony number 1. He uses the second song of a Wayfarer, which is Ging heut Morgen übers Feld. Today I go wandering in the field. The opening is very eerie, mysterious, like an awakening before he gets to use this song. But let's play the song first, as sung by the great baritone, Thomas Hampson.
Ging heut Morgen übers Feld, da noch auf den Gräsern hing, sprach zu mir der lustige Fink, ein Okay. Guten Morgen, ein Geld, wo ist nicht eine schöne Welt, schöne Welt. Wie mir doch die Welt gefällt. Blum am Feld hat die Lust nicht gut verdient, mit Engelchen Klingelkling, Klingelkling. Wenn Morgen uns gestellt, wird's nicht eine schöne Welt, schöne Welt. Kling, schönes Lied, wie mir doch die Welt gefällt. Heia!
this is all very good. Today, the bluebells in the field in cheerful spirits, merrily rung, with little bells, ding dong, etc. But then it ends in a typical Rickert and Mahler fashion. Hey, you, isn't it a beautiful world? Now will my happiness all begin? No, no, the happiness I mean can never bloom for me. Never, never. And now to the first symphony, the first movement. You will notice this opening descending fourth, Im Bom, which began Ging heut Morgen. It's also how he builds this mysterious introduction in the first movement of the symphony. And after 4.5 minutes of this awakening, I like to think of it, the tune Ging heut Morgen then comes in. I won't play the whole introduction. Very mysterious. Seiji Ozawa and the Boston Symphony. Hear that fourth. The cuckoos awaken in the clarinets. Moving along a bit. First two notes. Now. Clarinet imitating the cuckoo. It's a very lilting melody, both in the song and in the symphony. Probably the most famous moment to concert goers in this symphony is in the third movement. And it's not a Gustav Mahler song, but it is a song known as Frère Jacques or in English, Brother John, and in German, the version that Mahler knew, it's Bruder Martin or Brother Martin. And it begins as a solo in the contrabass, the string bass, and then it moves in canon and is developed. It's also, I should point out, as you will undoubtedly hear, it's in a minor key, not the major key we all learned as children. Again, the perfect fourth. And so on. We come to a point in music history where composers begin to write explicitly how we are to do a piece, both from the opening expressive markings or the tempo markings, or then all the little idiosyncrasies which we find in the middle of movements and so on. This opening is labeled feierlich und gemessen, ohne zu schleppen. And I think if there's one word that we find more often in Mahler, it's either nicht schleppen or schleppen. Schleppen means dragging. So the translation is solemn and measured without dragging. And I think it's a clue to a lot of his works, which sometimes are taken too slowly, that he writes nicht zu schleppen. We come now to Symphony number 2, the Resurrection Symphony, in which there are two works from the Wunderhorn Knaben, the Youth Magic Horn, which was collected by two gentlemen. It's folk poetry. It was collected in the early part of the 19th century. And it's one of those cycles, one of the early cycles that Mahler set a dozen or so songs with orchestra. The movement we are going to hear, or the song, is Antonius von Padua Fischpredigt, or St. Anthony's sermon to the fish. Anthony finds the church empty for his sermon. He goes to the river to preach to the fishes. They all flick their tails and glint in the sun. The carp, fat with roe, have all come along, their mouths open wide, attentive and rapt. No sermon was ever so pleasing to fish. And then at the end, the crabs, everything is as it was after the sermon. It made no effect. The crabs still go backwards. The cods still are bloated. The carp are still gorging. The sermon's forgotten. The sermons was pleasing. All stay as they were. Here again is the great Thomas Hampson with the song from Des Knaben Wunderhorn, Antonius Predigt zu Fisch. Again, the fourth.
Antonius zur Predigt, die Kirche wird liegt, geht zu den Flüssen und predigt den Fischen. Sie schlagen mit den Schwänzen, im Sonnenschein glänzen, im Sonnenschein glänzen, sie glänzen, sie glänzen, glänzen. Die Karpfen mit Bogen sind all hierher zogen, hat die Mäule auf Rissen sich zu überflitzen. Kein Predigt niemanden, den Fischen zu gefallen. Spitz-goschelte Hechte, die immer zu fechten, sind eins erschrocken zu hören den Frommen, auf jene Phantasten, die immer zu fasten, die Stockfisch ich meine, zur Predigt erscheinen.
The fish are pleased.
Ein Predigt niemanden,
Major key.
dem Stockfisch so fallen. Die vornehme Schnauzen, die selbst sich bequemen, die Predigt vernehmen, auf Krebse, Schildkröten, sonst langsame Boten, steigen eilig vom Grund zu hören diesen Mut. Kein Predigt niemand, den Krebsen so gefallen, Fisch große, Fisch kleine, vornehm und gemeine, erheben die Köpfe wie verständige Geschöpfe. Auf Gottes
Pleasing major key again.
die Predigt anhören. Die Predigt geendet, ein jeder sich wendet. Die Hechte bleiben lieben, die alle viel lieben, die Predigt hat gefallen, sie bleiben wie alle. Die Krebs gehen zurück, die Stockfisch bleiben hängen, die Karpfen viel fressen, die Predigt vergessen. Die Predigt hat gefallen, sie bleiben wie alle. Die Predigt hat gefallen.
The incomparable pianist is Jeffrey Parsons. Truly a collaboration between the singer and the pianist. Notice the hurdy-gurdy kind of effect in that accompaniment. When we get to the third movement of Symphony Number 2, which uses this song, however, without singer, the hurdy-gurdy part of the accompaniment becomes much more prominent. Indeed, Mahler spends a good deal at the opening of the piece using only the accompaniment before we hear the tune. There's a very ironic sounding theme that the clarinet plays, and I'm sure that it will stick out enough for you to hear. And also, it's a bit of a klezmer feeling in this. For those of you who don't know what a klezmer is, it's a traditional folk music that borrows inspiration from the music of both the synagogue, the Roman peoples, and European folk musics, and even sometimes classical music. It is usually done with fewer instruments. And when Mahler begins it here is indeed with fewer instruments. So here is how Anthony's fish sermon figures into Symphony Number 2, the third movement, and it is marked in calm, flowing movement. The fourth. Finally, the tune. Notice how snatches of the tune keep coming back in a different orchestration, first in the strings, in the clarinets, and the bassoon, and so on. As opposed to the song, which is about 4 minutes, this movement's quite lengthy. It's about 11 minutes. So we're going to skip ahead to the next. It's again the Knaben Wunderhorn song. It's called Urlicht, or Primal Light. And it's set in a most simplistic way, simplicity itself. It's hymn-like and is one of the great moving songs that Mahler wrote. And he used it again in this symphony. In the original, it can be sung by either a baritone, which we will hear, or a mezzo-soprano. In the symphony, it is sung by a mezzo-soprano. We will hear both. This is Urlicht. O little red rose, man lies in greatest need. Man lies in greatest pain. Even more would I rather be in heaven. There I came upon a broad path. There came an angel, and I wanted to turn me, wanted to turn me away. Ah, no, I would not be turned away. I am from God and want to return to God. The loving God will give me a little light, will illumine me to the eternal blessed life. In Mahler's music, we can find virtually every human emotion possible. There is love for certain. There is loss. There is pain. There is humor. There is sarcasm. There is reverence. His music, as now the end of the Romantic era and moving into the 20th century, is all about human emotions. And so we find in these various semblances of his music all kinds of these emotions dressed up in the guise of in the orchestrations or in the songs. And it's because of this humanness in his music, the humanity, that he uses the songs. Here is Urlicht, Primal Light, sung by Thomas Hampson.
Der Mensch liegt in größter Not.
Man lies in greatest need.
Der Mensch liegt in größter Not.
Man lies in greater pain.
mich Ach nein, ich ließ mich nicht abweisen. Ach nein, ich ließ mich nicht abweisen. Ich bin von Gott und will wieder zu Gott, der liebe Gott, der liebe Gott wird mir ein Lichtchen geben. Wird leuchten mir bis an das
The last words, ewig Leben, eternal life. And now let's listen to a bit of it with the orchestra. The brass playing a hymn. This is from an historic recording with the Philharmonia Orchestra, Otto Klemperer conducting. Heidi Meilig is the mezzo-soprano, and Elizabeth Schwarzkopf is the soprano, with the Philharmonia Orchestra and chorus. We come now to the Third Symphony in D minor, sketched in 1893 and mostly written in 1895. It certainly is Mahler's longest symphony, and it's possibly the longest in the standard repertoire. This one symphony in 6 movements takes anywhere from 95 minutes to an hour and 10 minutes, which is quite a disparity in length from the fastest to the slowest. Bernstein's recording, and we must give his due to Leonard Bernstein and Bruno Walter, great conductors in the past, who Walter was Mahler's assistant, at the Vienna Staatsoper, and he and Bernstein did a great deal to popularize or bring Mahler to the public when he was shunned by so many other conductors. The movements are: number 1, Pan Awakes Summer Marches In; 2, What the Flowers in the Meadow Tell Me; 3, What the Animals in the Forest Tell Me; 4, What Man Tells Me; 5, What the Angels Tell Me, which is for children and women's chorus; and 6, What Love Tells Me. The fourth movement, What Man Tells Me, is a setting of Nietzsche's text, The Midnight Song, from Also sprach Zarathustra. The fifth movement, Es sungen drei Engel, is from, again, Des Knaben Wunderhorn, and somewhere I have the text. These last texts we're going to explore are really quite nice. Here we go. 3 angels sang a sweet song, with blessed joy it rang in heaven. They shouted too for joy that Peter was free from sin. And as Lord Jesus sat at the table with his 12 disciples and ate the evening meal, Lord Jesus said, "Why do you stand there? When I look at you, you are weeping," and so on. The last verse, the heavenly joy is a blessed city, the heavenly joy that has no end. The heavenly joy was granted to Peter through Jesus, and to all mankind, eternal bliss. Here is Es sungen drei Engel with Thomas Hampson.
Es sungen drei Engel einen süßen Gesang, mit Freuden es selig in dem Himmel klang. Sie jauchzten fröhlich auf dabei, dass Hilflos sei, von Sünden frei, von Sünden, von Sünden, von Sünden frei. Und als der Herr Jesus zu Tische saß, mit seinen 12 Jüngern das Abendmahl aß, da sprach der Herr Jesus: Was stehst du denn hier? Was stehst du denn hier? Wenn ich dich ansehe, so weinest du nie, so weinest du mir. Sollt ich nicht weinen, o gütiger Gott? Ich hab übertreten die 10 Gebote.
Pity me. And now I want to play a bit of 2 versions of this, because they are so different yet so special, each one. The first is, both of these are from the symphony, the 5th movement, with children's chorus and women's chorus. The first is by Georg Schulte, and the Chicago Symphony. A bit of the Bernstein. The tempo marking or the expressive marking for this is lustig in Tempo und keck in Ausdruck. Lusty in tempo und keck, and I had never seen this word before other than in this symphony, and cheeky in expression. Lusty in tempo and cheeky in expression. My own view is that the next recording, Bernstein's, is a bit less cheeky, but a bit more childlike. That was the great Jenny Torrell singing that vocal solo there. We move now to the Fourth Symphony in G major, written 1899 and 1900, and it's the conclusion of these first four symphonies, collectively known as the Knaben Wunderhorn symphonies or the Wunderhorn symphonies, although the first symphony, the text and song is taken not from Knaben Wunderhorn, but from Lieder eines fahrenden Gesellen. The first symphony depicts heroic suffering and triumph, as so much of Mahler's music does. The second explores death and resurrection. The third contemplates existence and God. And the fourth, as an extension of the third's idea, explores life in heaven, but from a child's view, through a child's eyes. The sehr behaglich marking means with childlike, cheerful expression, entirely without parody. Das himmlische Leben. Here's a bit of that text. We revel in heavenly pleasures, leaving all that is earthly behind us. No worldly turmoil is heard in heaven. We all live in the sweetest peace. We lead an angelic existence, and so we are perfectly happy. We dance and leap and skip and sing. St. Peter in heaven looks on. Here comes the important part. Fine sprouts of every description are growing in heaven's gardens. Fine asparagus, fine herbs, and all we desire. Huge platefuls for us are prepared, fine apples, fine pears, and fine grapes. The gardeners let us pick freely. You want venison, hare, in the open streets, they go running around. This movement, the conclusion of the Fourth Symphony, was Mahler's inspiration as well as the goal for all that came ahead in this symphony. This movement was expressly written as the finale to Mahler Symphony Number 4. The Heavenly Life. Bernard Haitink, the Royal Concertgebouw, and Emily Amelie. It's interesting, there are two views, one more contemporary than the other, of the Fourth Symphony. When it was premiered and through the first several performances, which Mahler conducted himself, it didn't fare very well, possibly because it followed the third, which was a huge undertaking for both the composer and at an hour and 10 minutes, the audience as well, and the players, most especially. But in our own time, it seems, or in the late 20th century at least, when Bernstein was holding forth, it is believed that this symphony, because of its accessibility and smaller scale, helped to popularize Mahler. I'm going to end with a work that doesn't really have a song in it. But remember, at the opening, I read the poem by Rickert, I am dead to the world, or I am lost to the world. It begins and ends, I am dead to the world, alone with my love and my art. During the year 1901, Mahler worked on that fourth Rickert poem, setting that, as well as the Fifth Symphony. And I think there's a correlation between the moods of this particular song and the Adagietto from the Fifth Symphony. I think I will leave it to you to see if you want to make that connection as well. Here is the beginning of the Rickert Lieder, Ich bin der Welt abhand gekommen. Very ambivalent. We don't know where we are going. Haunting English horn. Uneasiness, maybe slightly restless. The Adagietto. Totally ambivalent. We do not know what key we're in. Now we do. If you saw the movie with Dirk Bogarde, De Luschino Visconti, Death in Venice, in which this music is used as a background, it says one thing. If you think of it as Gustav's love song to Alma, whom he married 1 year after completing this symphony, I think it throws a different light on it. And especially toward the end, where we reach this unbelievable climax. Completely satisfying, I think. Yes, please note next month's lecture on Benjamin Britten will be on Tuesday, June 20th, as opposed to Wednesday. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate it so much. Have a great week.